Hello, I'm Christina Brown, and this is Our Take on Arise TV, a talk show focused on the topics and stories related and of interest to women. And today's guest host is Kelly Smith-Beaty. She is back. Welcome back, Kelly.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Oh, well, listen, you've got a lot of Our Take fans. Kelly, you might remember, was a contestant on NBC's Apprentice and is now a communications and marketing strategist. It's been a couple years since you've been on The Apprentice. What have you been doing since?
I have been doing public relations and marketing, which is what I was doing prior to Apprentice. What's different now is I focus squarely on women's issues, so that's why this show is so exciting to me. It's so close to home. We get to have great conversations through our lens, so I'm excited to be here, and let's start talking.
Well, that's wonderful, because one of the stories that we're going to be paying a lot of attention to is women in the digital world. And later in the show, we're actually going to be talking to a woman who is trying to make a career transition and really trying to figure out how she best markets herself digitally so that she can capture the attention of people.
It's a changing world, and it changes every day. So, you know, I look forward to meeting her, and I hope I can, you know, share something with her that'll help.
All right. Well, welcome back, Kelly. Also with us today is Hillaray Crosley, another former guest co-host here on Our Take.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, this is alumni weekend.
Love it.
Yeah, well, thank you both for being here. Hillaray, as you might remember, is founder and editorial director of Parlour Magazine, as well as New York bureau chief of the Washington Post online magazine, The Root. And Hillaray, you're going to be with us here today to help us get through the Daily Take, which is all of our news of the day, top stories, and we've got a lot going on today.
Yes.
Topping the list is President Obama making his third and final stop on his trip to Africa and Tanzania today. He stopped by Senegal late last week and spent some time in South Africa over the weekend. But in Tanzania, it was cheering crowds that met the president in Dar es Salaam. For some, the time spent in this particular East African nation came as a surprise choice. But White House officials say Tanzania has a strong and vibrant democracy and is an important partner on a range of security issues. And Hillaray and Kelly, this is certainly a very different image than what we were seeing when the president first arrived in South Africa, where he was met by protesters.
It was so interesting, actually, because the report said that while the protests weren't necessarily long in their time span, people were upset. And it was primarily students of the University of Johannesburg who had set up outside where Obama was going to speak later, and the police had to quell their riot with rubber bullets and gas.
Which is really serious and really intense. And for this particular visit, it seems like this would be the last president, right, who would be met with this kind of response in Africa. We're talking about an African-American president, one whose father is from Kenya, one of the countries that he's not visiting.
Too much drama going on in Kenya.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, because of our support of Israel and the student support of Palestine, they felt like, you know, he wasn't being true to what he was saying he was supporting in terms of, you know, the underdog and what we're doing politically. They just didn't agree with, and so they took to the streets.
And Kelly, I can only imagine if you are part of the entourage of White House officials that are trying to brand or market this trip, what must they be saying? What are the conversations that are going on?
Well, they know. I mean, you know, the advanced team that goes into any country does a tremendous amount of work before any, particularly someone of the president's stature comes in. So it's something that they know, it's something that they are prepared for. But what I think is particularly about Tanzania is I actually was, you know, had the privilege of spending some time there a couple years ago, and I went with the great legendary Ambassador Andrew Young, and the Tanzanians are very hungry for an African-American presence in Africa. And so one of the things that we heard consistently is, why haven't you come back for us? The Chinese are here, you know, where are you? Our country and our continent is developing, but we don't see your faces. And so I think that the celebration that was surrounded the president is reflective of that. I think it's great, for better or for worse, that we're actually opening up conversations about Africa, its government, its economics, and, you know, the relations that stand to be gained between a U.S. presence there. So I hope that the conversation continues. I hope that we see more engagement on the continent.
And we did see some pretty exciting announcements made by the president over the weekend when it came to American investment in Africa. We understand that while he's in Tanzania, he's actually going to be visiting an American-owned oil infrastructure power company. So we definitely see where just his visibility, of course, raises the visibility and awareness awareness of the other American and Western-owned companies
Absolutely.
in those countries. So clearly a very important visit
Absolutely,
indeed.
very.
And speaking of Tanzania, keeping on that note, First Lady Michelle Obama is expected to speak at the first African First Lady Summit tomorrow. The Obamas, as well as President Bush and former First Lady Laura Bush, are also expected to attend. African First Ladies from across the continent will gather for the George W. Bush Institute Summit. Its focus is on the important role that First Ladies play in promoting women's education, health, and economic empowerment. What an interesting photo op that's going to be.
I want to see Laura Bush and Michelle Obama dancing together.
Which we
Get 'em in a
saw.
little
We saw
groove.
plenty of President Bush and Laura Bush dancing during his visits to Africa.
Right. Awkwardly.
Right, awkwardly. Didn't quite have the same rhythm as some of others. But this is also a very important, not only summit, but visibility and role that's being given to the First Ladies of Africa in terms of what their impact is and what they can do for the people that their husbands
Yes.
are presidents or leaders of.
I think it also sort of speaks to the lack of Obama's presence in this area, because where's the Obama is Great Institute? Like I'm looking for that if I, as an African American, and I'm sure as an African, I'd say, okay, well, all of these other, let's say it, white men have come here and they have institutes, they're holding lunches, First Ladies are getting together and putting on their good head wrap. Like, where are you?
Right.
And I think while I love Michelle Obama and I support her, especially when she calls out people who are interrupting her speech, this is what I don't do. Oh, really?
Right, and of course you're talking about when she was at the fundraiser,
Yes.
and someone interrupted her over
Yes,
the
and I
president's
love,
position
she
of
gives
gay
me
rights.
life.
Yeah.
I love it. But at the same time, I want her to sort of pull Barack aside and say, boo, I feel like this weekend has been a marker for us.
Yeah.
And this has been great, but we should start something of our own.
And there's a possibility that perhaps we might see more from them after he leaves office.
Absolutely, and I think in fairness to the president, I mean, Bush is over. He did, some things while he was a sitting president, but this is his legacy, and he has a lot to clean up. So I think we'll see what happens when the Obamas actually leave office as well.
And we've got another big story topping the headlines here in the Daily Take. Unfortunately, one of a sad note. 19 firefighters died in a fast-moving wildfire in central Arizona on Sunday. They were actually part of an elite firefighting crew and were trying to protect themselves by setting up tent-like structures before they were overtaken. The fire has now already destroyed more than 200 homes in Yarnell, Arizona. That's a town of about 700 residents, and it's about 85 miles northwest of Phoenix. It is now the deadliest day for U.S. firefighters. U.S. firefighters battling a blaze, a wildfire since 9/11 when 340 people died. This is such a sad story. Imagine your first responders out there trying to protect you, and then they lose their lives.
It's just very, very sad. Extremely sad. I really
There's no
don't.
getting around it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, too, the early reports indicate that apparently this was sparked by lightning. But they've also had 3-digit temperatures for several days. And let's not forget that in many ways, this is very much the beginning of summer and also the beginning of fire season.
In the middle of global warming.
In the middle of, yes, that too, especially for those who choose not to deny that it exists.
Exactly.
Well, in other news, today begins the second week of testimony in the George Zimmerman trial. Zimmerman is on trial in Florida for the killing of teenager Trayvon Martin. Reports say that this week the focus will be on more scientific-type witnesses, unlike the ones who testified last week. And we're actually going to be speaking a little further about one of the witnesses last week, a little later in the show, Rachel Jeantel, who prosecutors consider their star witness. But you're smiling. Dare I ask?
I feel for Rachel because I've been on a stand before, and I've been on a stand in a murder trial. We're not going to get into that. That'll be for another time. But you can't imagine the levity of every single word that you say and the way that they can pick it apart to make you wonder, well, did I do that? Was I there?
Yeah.
And so I think she really held it together. Again, Also, though, the comments that have come from people, specifically in the African American community, I think are showing more about that person.
Yes.
For example, Lolo Jones.
You're talking about the Olympian who
And
had
she tweeted and made an off-color Medea joke about Rachel
But
in the middle of a murder trial.
But I think the other thing that's really fascinating is how we are seeing how quickly the prosecution is going through all of their witnesses. You know, much of the testimony that we saw last week centered on the voices and images that witnesses thought that they saw and heard. We heard from a number of people who had made 911 calls. Obviously, we heard from Rachel Jantel, who was on the phone with Trayvon Martin just moments before his encounter with George Zimmerman. But this week, at least what we're hearing and seeing today is we are now hearing from the scientists, right? We're talking about the people that are going to pick apart the crime scene video, the scientifically dissect the audio files. But nevertheless, it still comes back to this 17-year-old boy up against a then 28-year-old grown man, and how it's captured the national and international audience in general.
You know, I think this week, we'd have to go back to the science. It's such a human case, and it raises so many of our own biases and our own prejudices, wherever side of this that we fall. And so last week, it was a very human experience. I mean, you saw it on social media, people talking about what they heard and how they sounded. But, you know, I think in the circus and in the zoo of it all, we forget that this is a real murder case, and we have to look at the evidence, and we have to play everything that we have to really bring justice for, I hope, the Martin family. Every time they show Zimmerman's picture, I mean, it just makes my skin crawl. And the witnesses today are very important because they kept out several bits of information that the prosecution wanted to enter. So I think this will be a very important witness. It could be a game changer for the case, but you know, we've had the human aspect, and now we have to really bring in the science to it.
Yeah. Another case that will eventually be decided by a judge, this one coming out of California, where a judge is expected to rule on whether yoga is a religious practice that should not be taught in public schools. All this after a family in the Encinitas Union School District filed a lawsuit in February claiming that the 30-minute classes are inherently religious. Now that, of course, would be a violation of the separation between church and state. And I swear, Hillary, if you roll your eyes one more time, and as we wait for the judge to decide, we should know that some teachers and parents have noticed that since students have been practicing, they are claiming that their kids are actually behaving a bit more calm and they are more focused since yoga has entered their lives. All right,
I'm
Hillary.
waiting for this. I'm just like, go, Hillary,
Hillary,
go.
you rolled your eyes backwards.
It is so ridiculous. Like, it's so ridiculous. People get into these, and first of all, let me just say, I'm a Christian. I like to pray. Jesus is my friend. But like, just because I'm doing downward facing dog doesn't mean that I'm having a religious experience. I'm stretching. You know what I'm saying?
And you know what's interesting about this case is that the school district has said that they have gone to great lengths, right, to take out the religious components or the spiritual, actually I should say the spiritual components that are part of yoga. They've gone to great lengths to do that. The other thing is this is a class that's actually an elective.
Yes.
This is not something that is mandated that every child
Can you imagine a school gym full of kids, teenagers?
You know, so when you think about, hey, one, your kid doesn't have to participate.
No.
Two, we have taken out what we think really are the spiritual components.
Aspect,
and if you take yoga, you know that there is a position
which
that
they don't even force them to do anymore.
Yeah, so there's no prayer position or anything like that.
And you don't have to thank your body for what it's done.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fine.
Yeah, you don't have to say namaste.
You know?
I mean, you know, what an amazing point of privilege for this to be what you're upset about in your school.
Right.
You know,
so true.
Forget school violence, forget
First
not
world
having
problems.
books. Right.
Hashtag.
You know, what an, my heart bleeds for you.
Yeah, like tell your kids you don't want them to stretch, whatever.
Yeah, but getting back to your point, and I like how you first identified yourself as a Christian. I can tell you that there was a church that I used to go to many years ago that absolutely the pastor did preach from the pulpit that he did not think that yoga was a wise practice for the congregants of this particular church.
Really? I'm sorry to laugh.
He absolutely did. He did not think that it was
devilish.
He didn't say that.
Satan is coming through your pose.
He didn't say that. But in discussing this story with some of the other people in the newsroom, there were some that said, well, you know what? I can identify with the parents because I do see yoga as something that I consider is religious. Yoga at its heart is spiritual, right? Yoga at its heart is not just stretching.
Right.
But now, at its heart, we'll have to have a judge decide.
Right.
Whether
Well,
the
after it
kids get to
becomes
do
a national fad, though, how spiritual is it really?
And that is true.
I think that's the point. How many people truly practice yoga
Properly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Hillaray Crosley, thank you so much for joining us for
Thank you
today's
for having
Daily Take.
me.
Of course,
Please ask me about
I-
anything
yeah.
yoga and spiritually related. I love it.
and I'm going to, of course, ask you to come back again and again and again. Thank you
Absolutely.
again. And we are on Facebook and Twitter. You can follow us on Twitter by simply going to @OurTakeAriseTV, but you can also like and leave comments on our Facebook page by heading to Our Take on Arise TV. I'm Christina Brown, and you are watching Our Take.